Okay, we're live. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining this episode of Dog Training Won't Solve Your Problem If. Today, I'm speaking with Louisa Ruhe of Pomodoro. Louisa is a pioneer at the intersection of animal-centered design, technology, and business strategy. As a solo mother by choice and lifelong learner, she brings a purpose-driven lens to her work, reimagining how brands, systems, and families can thrive when we center care across species, identities, and futures. Um, this is the third episode in the series, and today the topic is dog training won't solve your problem if the world wasn't built with them in mind. This series and these conversations ask us to see dogs in their wholeness and to reimagine relationships based on reciprocity with their human kin, challenging the kind of more traditional top-down, power-over implications of the dog trainer paradigm. So I'm very excited about today's chat. Um, Before linking up with Louisa, I'd never heard of dog-centered or animal-centered design. And so I just wonder if maybe we should start there. Would you be able to tell us a bit more about that?
Of course. So first of all, thank you for inviting me. This is exciting. And I think there's a lot of ground to cover. So I'm sure our conversation will be pretty rich. But so animal-centered design. It stems from its kind of sister of like human-centered design or user-centered design. And I worked for many years designing for humans, products and services, anything from appliances to a service, like going to a restaurant and what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing that, you really want to understand what users' needs, what they want, what they desire, what they don't like. And that's how you design for them. And then about, I want to say 12 or 13 years ago, I kind of expanded the breadth of users I worked for to include animals.
Okay, very cool.
So that led me to a PhD in animal computer interaction, which is kind of the academic term for the discipline.
Mm.
And it varies, no, because with a human, well, we were talking, so I could ask you what you need and what you desire and what you want. Although a lot of times what people say is not what they actually want. So there's a level of like detective work there.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is that animals are part of our society, and some are more. So, companion animals, of course, are an integral part of society. But anything from livestock, wild animals, we share our habitats with them. And if we're going to be like the species that, as you say, has like power, the type of power we decide to have over, with, or to them is up to us. So, that's
Mm-hmm.
animal centered design, where if we're going to design anything, whether it be, I don't know, a city park or a veterinary experience, we should really understand or try to the best of our human abilities,
Mm-hmm.
what the animal's needs would be.
Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely fascinating, and makes total sense. When you think about, yeah, as you say, like we have this power, and we have a responsibility.
Hmm.
We take up a lot of space on this planet, but we are not the only ones, and we are not the kind of um, what am I trying to say? We are not more important than our more than human kin, whether they are companion animals, which for us will probably create like an emotional incentive, right, to
Hmm.
kind of like create a world that's built for them. But it's not just even about who we deem to be, um,
Exactly.
like what about the kind of pigeons in the city, or like the animals who don't necessarily like live in our homes as companion species, but live amongst us, right? Um, and yeah, so as you say, this comes from a human-centered design, and when you're working with people, you have language and you can kind of ask directly, what they need, what their preferences are, what kind of feels too much for them. And I'm really, really curious about what does that process look like when you're working with animals, where we don't have that kind of verbal language, animals, and then also with dogs specifically.
So, yeah. So one thing we have going for us as humans is now our powers of observation and analysis and empathy. So that's
Hmm.
like step one, understanding that we do, like, not that nobody else has that, but we're conscious that we have that ability. So the process really goes into using those capabilities to try and understand the other species.
Hmm.
In terms of like the verbal part of things, it's important, but you can also think about when you're designing for babies or nonverbal humans, you also don't have that. But there are all sorts of cues you can use to understand kind of a message.
Hmm.
So when it comes to animals and specifically dogs, you kind of go through an inventory of their physical, sensory, emotional, cognitive, cultural capabilities and characteristics.
Hmm.
And based on that, you can start kind of imagining, because imagination plays a really big part in this, what their experience of the world looks like.
Hmm.
And based on that, then you can start making design decisions.
Right.
So, for example, when it comes to dogs, you know, as a, I think it's a Dr. Horowitz, Alexander Horowitz, she sees like as we see dogs smell.
Mhm.
So
Yes. Yes.
we know physically the strength of a dog's sense of smell,
Hmm.
and we know physically our ability to see, which is actually pretty good. And these are our primary senses. So we use our eyes mostly, dogs use their nose mostly. And
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
start comparing those in a specific context, then you get different outcomes. So if you're thinking of designing a product for a dog, actually, like the materials you use, how they smell,
Yeah.
especially plastics and off gassing, that's a huge deal to them. That to us might be like, whatever, you open the package, let it air out, and you're good to go. You don't know what that's doing to the dog and their behavior.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, in general, it's a very kind of systematic process because you're considering how things are causing consequence. And, but it's also, you have to go kind of baby step by baby step.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you've mentioned smell. I always tell my clients, your dog sees with their nose, and I think that's probably pretty commonly understood by people, or at least people who live with dogs, have dogs, that they have a really strong nose,
Mhm.
that their nose, they require outlets for their sense of smell, in order for them to kind of like lead enriching, fulfilling lives. But what are some of these other kind of like capabilities and sensory, yeah, qualities that they have that you might consider from a design perspective?
So eyesight is a big one as well. So dogs see pretty well, but they don't see things. I believe it's like 13 or 14 inches. They start seeing things blurry. So like you might see a dog that you'll put like their treat or something for them to eat right in front of them and they almost miss it when it's really close and they end up finding it with their nose. No? So
Yeah. Yeah.
so if you like think about all these biological differences and how they express themselves, you can start
Hmm.
building on that. So eyesight is one. They also see movement from very far. So you might be walking with your dog and they'll all of a sudden have a weird behavior and it might be something that moved and you didn't even see it. When you think of their sense of hearing, it's also different than ours. They have access to other frequencies. Their ears have, I believe, like 18 different muscles, so they can not only move their ears way more, and it's all breed dependent, depending on the types of ears. I think there's like 6, 7 types of ears, and they can also move them independently. So you might see your dog, moving one ear and the one stays. And so they're creating this kind of auditory world that also is very different than ours, who have our ears stuck. And to move our ability to hear, we have to actually move our heads. Dogs can keep their heads in one position and just move their ears.
Hmm.
If you think
Yeah.
of touch, well, they're covered in fur. And so that again is a completely different experience because for us to like feel a breeze, even though we also have hair, um, depending on their coat, they might feel it more or less. When you think of their sense of taste, there's also a lot of differences. Their sense of taste is not as kind of deep as ours, but they also, again, complement it a lot with their nose. So, good smelling food might be a better experience for them than better tasting food.
Mm, mm,
Set
okay, yeah,
aside
right.
nutrients and all like the nutritional value of the food, but as an experience, they might enjoy a better smelling food because their taste relies so much on smell again. So this is kind of the process you go through. You kind of start to understand how the animal sees, hears, touches, tastes, like the sensory part.
Mhm.
Establish what we have in common, which is a lot, but also the differences and how those differences will permeate our experiences of of the same. So if we're both walking, we're having completely different experiences.
Yeah, yeah, okay, that's very fascinating, and a few things that, you just, described touched on, like, how the different, sensory experience of the world is gonna be impacting their behavior, like you were talking about you say 18 different muscles in the
I
ears?
believe so.
That's a lot. I mean, I actually don't know how many muscles I have in my ears, but 18 sounds like a lot. And the ability to kind of move one in one direction and one in the other. A lot of my clients have dogs, with sound sensitivity. Sound sensitivity often comes like part and parcel with a huge range of behavioral issues
Yeah.
um, behavioral issues come from a dog being chronically aroused or dysregulated, right? And so if they're stressed out by one particular thing or life in general, it's going to be really likely that they're sound sensitive because their ears are like so switched on, and maybe
Yep.
they're not necessarily in an environment that is like really considering that difference. So I guess I'm just wondering, like, so you go through this process where you understand the different, like, the sensory world of a dog and how that might be similar or different from us. And then, like, what are some of the outputs in terms of like design, whether that's like a space or you mentioned a toy? But yeah, what are some other examples that you might kind of like take that information and then apply to something that you're designing?
So you usually how to let me think how to answer this because it depends what you're designing. But it's
Sure.
almost like you do this kind of inventory of similarities and differences. And with that inventory, then you approach whatever you're designing. And all my years designing for humans, I'm going to digress a little, but I think it's important. There's a lot of things you take for granted because we're human. No, so I'm like, oh yeah, Megan sees the same as me. But it turns out that we actually don't. You might see different shades. You might have sensitivities that I don't have. And so when you are when you're sure you're not the same species, because you're never like, I know I'm a dog. I totally get it. It makes you kind of be more careful.
Hmm.
And so once you have those points, depending on what it is. So for example, let's use the example of a toy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Humans love the color red. No, it's a color that there's a lot of dog toys that are red. There's nothing wrong with that. Dogs don't see red. No,
Right.
their spectrum of sight is from blue to yellow, so they might see red as a dark gray. They might also love a dark gray.
Sure.
So that's
Sure.
why I'm saying it's not bad that toys are red. But then the problem is that if you're, for example, playing with this toy or throwing it, for you, maybe that red ball against the green grass is super easy to see. For the dog, the green grass they'll be able to see, but then the ball becomes gray. So when you start putting together these differences we have in experience within the context, not only of the product itself, like what I mentioned, the plastics and off gassing, but the product in the context you're going to use it, it matters.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Yeah.
that's how you incrementally start understanding, okay, the product needs to do this. They're going to, each species is going to perceive it in a different way. And then the product is going to be used in this context. And that context is going to be perceived differently by these two species.
Mm.
And so that's why I say it's kind of very purposeful, but small steps. And you can't solve for everything because then you'd
Sure.
never finish.
Anything. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Okay. Mm.
some of the things will kind of bubble up and be like, no, this might be really important to solve for.
Mm, mhm, mhm, yeah, because that's, I guess, what I'm thinking, right? It's like, so you're using the example of a toy, and, if it's a toy for a dog, we really wanna design it in a way that makes sense for, like, their experience of the world and how they're gonna see it or smell it or understand it. But I'm also thinking about like the built environment or like the kind of homes that they live in, the cities that they walk in, the parks that they go to. Um, those are things that at best have had considerations for humans, but not always, right? In terms of how they're structured and developed, um, and like what does that mean? Um, for like the long-term impact for a dog and their behavior,
Mm,
going back to this example, for example, of sound sensitivity, right? Like there's a lot of training out there that works on like desensitizing or whatever,
yeah,
a dog and their sound sensitivity, and maybe that looks like, I don't know, ringing the doorbell and giving your dog a treat, ringing your doorbell and giving the dog a treat, or something like that.
yeah.
And that really is trying to, like, get the dog to fit into the human world, right? I hate the term desensitization because, like, I don't really want that, right? I would rather this perspective where we're actually, like, considering their
Mhm.
senses, right? And how their environment, like, is gonna, either promote well-being or drive stress. So, yeah, I just wonder, like, what do we
How
do
do I
about that?
see that? So the built environment is a tricky one on many levels. So I think initially, so we bred a lot of dogs to have specific capabilities, no? And a lot
Yes.
of the breeds we've created kind of stem from a certain type of work we wanted them to do, and that
Mhm.
work usually happened not in the city.
Yes.
No, so that's like issue one. You have these breeds that were made for working in the countryside, living in a completely different context. So
Yeah.
already there, you're like, oh, no, they were
Yeah.
designed to herd and to run and to hear really well because they hear like the sheep far away. And now they're in a space where when you think of sound in cities, the way sound bounces off the concrete, the pavement, all the materials you see is must be like crazy. But that's like the nature part. No, then you have the nurture part. So
Yeah,
how
okay.
do you bring up a dog in this new environment?
Mm,
No, but you can't take one out of the other. So there's just it's just so kind of there's so much to talk about, but let's say you're walking down a sidewalk. Let's take You're just walking a block of sidewalk with your dog. Most likely, they will be on a leash, and the sidewalk might be wide. It might not be that wide. And they're encountering another dog. So, dogs usually don't greet themselves like face to face.
head
We
on, yeah.
humans
Yeah,
do.
yes. Yeah.
No, and we don't feel that to be necessarily, we might keep our distance, but we will come face to face. Dogs circle each other.
Yes.
If the sidewalk doesn't allow that, then there's already like stress.
Exactly, sorry.
No, like so here the built environment is determining and the leash as well. No, because if you have a short leash, they can't really circle and then they get tangled and the humans don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So there's all this stuff where we're changing the way they're kind of operationally built. So that's like a good example. Another example is surfaces. We use
Okay.
shoes.
Yes.
We cannot we it might be a hot day, and but we're not thinking the grass is this temperature, the pavement is this temperature, the stone is this temperature, and dogs' paw pads are incredibly sensitive. And
Mm.
so that's another kind of thing. No, we're walking through many different surfaces that we take for granted because we're insulated with our shoes, and they are
Mhm.
not.
Yeah.
Then there's, the soundscape in a city. And again, we don't necessarily understand cognitively their abilities, but let's say that, you know, um, I have a 2-year-old and my son knows that, it's an ambulance and he'll go like, wee woo, wee woo. So I know that cognitively he's made that relationship between this noise and ambulance, not a threat.
Yeah. Yeah.
It might be loud or it might disturb him, but there's no, yeah. And we don't really know those relationships that dogs are making. And you'll have construction, an ambulance, someone honking, and then you don't know how that's bouncing off the walls.
Oh.
So that's another kind of part of the built environment itself. So you have all these parts that go into walking your dog that might seem super simple, and they're really adaptable. Like, that's why they're such a great companion animal.
Yeah, yeah, they really try.
They try, no, but that doesn't mean that they're comfortable.
No,
And
no.
and you can't solve for everything. Like I said, like, you can't, take away the sounds of the city. You can't change surfaces. You can put shoes on them, but yeah, I don't know if that's
Sure.
comfortable. You have to also get them used to it. And then and these all these examples are not even their strongest sense. So we haven't even talked about
Yeah,
city smells
yeah.
or
The
how they
cities, I'm sure,
travel.
are smelly.
I'm sure they're smelly. There's a lot of smells, and we as humans, because our sense of smell is important, but not that dominant.
Mhm.
I don't even know what it must smell like when you turn a corner and then you're turning a corner into a smaller alley. The How wind is concentrating, how the air is flowing, because it's like if you could see the cityscape with all the little arrows of airflow where everything's going.
Sure.
No,
Oh, yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
but we can't.
Put
And
on the
and
ground,
that's what our
yes.
dogs are experiencing. So there might be smelling, the butcher down the corner, the dog that just peed on the bush next to them. And
Yeah,
so it can be a lot.
yeah, yeah, totally, like, potential for sensory overwhelm, like, quite easy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sensory, and I don't like, animal centered design doesn't expect the human to account for all of these things, but it does expect you to account for an awareness of the difference. And so
yeah,
when your dog behaves in a way that it's either uncharacteristics or might be frustrating for you, like they just stalk or then they pull on I think the responsibility there is not to understand exactly why that's happening, because that might be impossible, but to understand that it's happening not because they're trying to be difficult, but because they experienced something that affected their experience.
yeah, yeah.
And to be curious and give them a moment and give yourself a moment and maybe
Mhm.
try and figure it out. But
Yeah.
they're not reacting just for reacting's sake.
Yeah, like something's going on. And if we haven't picked up on what that is, that's not like an indication that our dog is being stubborn, right? Or that they need to be told what to do or that they're not listening, right? It's like something's going on in their sensory world that we're not
Yeah.
picking up on that is bringing them some level of concern. And if that's happening to them every single day, right, then that's going to mean that their environment has put them in probably like a chronic state of stress, even if it's like underlying, even if they're not always in reaction, like their
Yeah.
baseline stress level is going to be like way beyond their like window of tolerance and way beyond their ability to kind of like learn or listen to us in the first place. Um,
Yeah.
and I like, you were saying we can't solve for everything, but we can, going back to what we were saying at the beginning, like we do have a responsibility,
Mhm.
as the humans, as the ones with the power to try and consider what it's like for them. And I really like this idea, for those of you watching who haven't checked out Pomodogo. Pomodogo is so cool because it like looks at, you know, the canine like experience of smell or touch or taste. And so it gives you that chance to kind of like step into their paws a bit. Um, and then try and consider what they might need, like how you might support them.
Mhm.
Or, no, I love that you've touched on, the kind of problem that we are seeing. I personally see it in London all the time, of like, traditional like working breeds being brought into these environments because maybe people don't know the history or don't understand what it means to bring like a working cocker spaniel into a small city flat. And like those poor dogs, they just are not getting their needs met, and then they have loads of behavioral issues. But that's because they're really, yeah, environment is not built for them. So big PSA to those watching who don't have a dog and one day want to get a dog, please do breed research. I have so many moments in my work where I'm just like, oh, if only we could have chatted before you got a dog. Um, but it's not no fault to people. Like sometimes they just don't know. So I think that's why it's really important that what you're trying to do is like help people really understand what's going on for dogs. And so there's the kind of, oh, there's mine. There's the kind of what you can do before to make sure that, or try at least to get a breed
Yeah.
that would be more amenable. But then there's the kind of, there's probably loads of people who maybe haven't considered this before and do have a dog. Maybe the dog is nervous or anxious or reactive, and are starting to understand that, it's to do with the kind of sensory overwhelm of their environment. And I this is kind of making me think of like in the human world, this concept of access intimacy. It's come up, coined by someone called Mia Mingus. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah. I looked it up a bit,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
a little
Great.
bit.
Great. Cool. Okay. So I experienced chronic hip pain, and it started a few years ago. And I was this kind of idea was brought to me, and I really think it's really beautiful, because when we think about access, right? We think about how we can make the built environment more accessible to people with different physical,
Mhm.
um, disabilities or mental kind of disabilities. And that's like changes to the environment. But access intimacy is this concept that's more relational, and it's
Mhm.
like, okay, rather than um, trying to change the built environment because that's not always possible. It's that kind of like feeling of care and solidarity that you get from someone who's like, just like, yeah, it fucking sucks. Like, like being able to be there with you and like in your emotions, in the kind of frustration, in the kind of, oh my God, as if like the stairs are all the way up these two, or the toilet is all the way up these two flights of stairs, and
Yeah.
someone not being able to change the stairs in that moment, but being like, yeah, that's crap. Like, why do we have that? Or should we just go for a walk and find a cafe where there is an accessible toilet? So it's that
Mhm.
kind of much more relational concept of access and solidarity. And I guess like I'm thinking about that, like, but from an interspecies perspective, like from the human dog perspective of what you're just talking about, right? So like what can we do for dogs who are living in these environments, that isn't just about like training them to like not react to the kind of sounds that they're hearing, or to not be so leash reactive because
Mhm.
the sidewalk means that they can't even meet each other. Yeah, like what are the changes that we can, how can we be in solidarity with dogs in terms of access?
So I think the example you put is really interesting because so if I am your friend, no, and one thing there's so much research on pain, for example. And that I think I would say most people understand that describing pain is really hard, whether it's a
Mm,
hospital context, the 1 to 10 scale, the happy to sad scale, whatever. We understand that your pain is your pain, and describing it doesn't even it usually doesn't actually convey to like 100% veracity what you're
mm,
experiencing, right?
mhm.
But if I am your friend and we're going to a coffee shop and you express pain about a situation that for me, I feel no pain, you know, I'm super bluntly, worst case scenario, I might be like, oh my God, it's just 2 flights of stairs.
Sure, yeah, mhm.
But when you put it relationally, I will not judge. No, I'll withhold that judgment. I'll be like, okay, to me, it seems super easy. For some reason, for Megan, it might not be. Let's just find another place. And it will be very easy for me to put kind of your needs before mine. And that will just happen kind of seamlessly. Like we won't even have it won't be like, no, let's stay in this one. Try and go up the 2 flights of steps like that. That wouldn't happen. No.
Yeah.
So there you have the kind of two parts of the kind of interaction you want to have. You have one
Mhm.
when you're withholding judgment and you're like, I don't understand her experience. I'm not experiencing the same thing, but she is communicating something.
Mm.
And two, that relational part where it's like, of course, let's go somewhere where she's more comfortable. And I actually, a third one, no, sorry, tied to the first one, I don't understand it. I don't understand your pain and I'm okay not understanding.
Yes.
No. So when you put that in the human dog context, they're the same two elements. It's like their experience is different than ours. I might figure it out. I might not, but I'm okay with not understanding. I'm
Mm,
okay with
mhm.
not understanding why my dog always, pulls at the leash and barks at skateboards, moving wheels. Who knows? Like, which is a common problem.
Yeah.
But then the reaction to that can be like, but it's my dog and I have the leash and I'm going to or be relational. Like, man, this is really uncomfortable for him. So what do? You can try to avoid moving wheels very hard in a city, or you can know that when it's going to happen, you can preempt because you might see this coming from afar or you might know, and you yourself can regulate your reaction.
Yes. Oh my god.
No?
Yeah.
And be like, this is gonna happen. Like, I have no idea why this dog has this thing. It's gonna happen. How do I make this kind of experience better for everyone? And when I say everyone, it's not just you and your dog, but it might be the skateboarder or that. So, try and, take some distance or maybe try and vocalize like I have a reactive dog to wheels. So people, humans around me, this dog is gonna bark. So because you can know when a situation is going to happen and you can kind of choose to make the best of it. You can also be confronted with a completely surprise situation that you didn't see coming, but then you go back to that like that I don't know what they're experiencing, and that's where empathy kind of comes in and be like, I don't know what just happened, but I'm sure it's not because they want to be a problem dog.
Yeah, yeah.
No. So it starts to become where you're. And it's a hard thing to do. Like, it's not super easy, and it's like a muscle. Because there are times when you're in a rush and then your dog is, like, not helping, and you're like, "Ah."
Mhm.
But most of the time, you can take those 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds to be like, "Ugh, what just happened or what is gonna happen?" And I think that's kind of it becomes almost like a superpower because then your reaction isn't making it worse. That's what you have power over, no? How you react to the situation.
Yeah, yeah, and then that's exactly, like, I guess, going back to the example, we were just doing, like, from a human perspective, that's the, like, second part is, like, okay, like, I don't understand it, but I don't need to, like, be in your experience and have the same experience as you to understand that you need some support right now. And that like ability to kind of like step outside of what's happening is the kind of thing that can regulate your nervous system for a second. So you're not like in reaction like,
Right.
because you don't understand it and now you've become stressed because you don't understand it, right? Instead it's like, no, no, no. I know that we're having a different time here, and that gives me the ability to just take a second. And yeah, like I think the thing that you just touched on is something that I hear all the time around like this tension that we sometimes have where we're in a bit of a rush, right? And like we can't be perfect 100% of the time, but dogs who are more anxious, more stressed, find the world a bit more overwhelming, like they sniff more, right? Because they're trying to understand their environment. They're trying to like process what's going on. So
Yeah.
if they're more like, what is this crazy city that we live in? They're gonna want to stop and sniff everything, right? Um, so like really, really being able to be like, okay, well, if I only have 20 minutes, I'm not going to have this like idea where we need to go this
Yeah.
far away from the home, or like we need to get to the park or have this kind of like journey planned out. It's like the priority is actually just letting them move at their pace and letting them sniff because that's so integral to how they're making sense of things. And the more we kind of like try and pull them along because we're not in understanding their experience, the kind of more likely they're going to want to continue to sniff because they still haven't made sense of things. So it's like, how do we? So the more we can try and understand what's going on for
Mhm.
them, the more we can actually like move in flow with each other and in collaboration. In this like stressful
Right.
environment, cities are stressful to us too.
Yeah. No, and I think, taking that example again, like human to human and human to animal, like again with the coffee shop example. Now, if we're going to get a coffee, the intention of that interaction is almost implied. You and I are going to find a place to have a nice drink and sit and chat. We don't need to almost set that intention before we meet up because we have those social rules. And then what you're saying about with your dog on the walk, no, what is the intention? Because a lot of the times they're like, no, we need to cover distance because I need them to exercise because I also need them to exercise. But to your point, if your intention is like, we're going to have a walk and it's going to be enjoyable for both, and then you figure out how to do the exercise, it might be playing at home a little bit more
Hmm.
because you'd rather have, maybe missing a little exercise, but having a good time out than no exercise out because they're so anxious and then a horrible time. Like, so it's like these small trade offs. So
Yeah.
if you set the intention for the walk, and to your point, it's like, I'm going to cover, I don't know, 2 blocks in 20 minutes, have at it. And the thing is that if you actually do that, the experience for you as a human is also really rewarding because we're in a hurry all the time. So, like, I recently watched this series, Baskets, but he's training to be a clown, but they have him walk a turtle around the
Okay.
city block. No?
Sure. Uh huh.
But then he notices all this stuff. So,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
so then it's just set when you're interacting with another species who you don't really understand and you will never understand. Maybe tech will get us there, but right now we're not there. The setting the intention part is really important because then it sets the stage for the interaction. So what is the intention for my dog to get exercise? Then you might be like, you know what? I'm not going out for a walk. We're going to play inside.
Yeah.
If the intention is to like have them go out a little because they've been inside so long, then maybe you can't cover that much distance. If the intention is I need to run an errand and I need my dog to go with me, then maybe it's like, well, let's maybe not go during like super traffic hours.
Yeah.
So and by that you start making these trade-offs more purposefully.
Yeah. I'm all about intention setting in life, and I like really love that. Like, okay, what is the intention? Like, what is the point of what we're trying to do here? Because like maybe I'm trying to meet my dog's needs for something, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, is the walk always the thing that meets that need? If the walk is stressful, then yeah, exactly as you say, maybe we can play inside. Maybe we can do some like kind of enrichment in the garden, whatever it
Mhm.
is. Yeah, and, like, just cultivating more mindfulness in your everyday relationship with your dog, right? And then the more mindful you are, the more you're probably, like, communicating with your dog, and the more your dog probably has an understanding of what's going on. I mean, obviously, things get lost in translation, but dogs are very smart, and the more we're kind of, like, letting them know what's going on in the ways that we can, the more that they're gonna feel, like, regulated and safe in their relationship, because they're like, "Okay, I get this," and then that's gonna make, the kind of more stressful experiences, like, a bit easier to navigate, um, because we're doing it in ways that kind of meet them where they're at, right, and their own capacity.
Yeah.
Um, when I work with clients, like, the first step most of the time is management. It is which is just kind of a kind of industry term for people who don't know around, like, how we can kind of limit a dog's exposure to the things that find them stressful.
Mhm.
Um, Not perfect, again, taking your example, if our dog is afraid of wheels and we live in a city, obviously they're not we're gonna have to, like, lock them inside forever to never see a wheel again. But it's, like, kind of cultivating this awareness of, like, what are the things on a day-to-day basis that you find stressful? And how can I manage your environment and your routine in a way that reduces that exposure? Just to give the dog time for, like, the nervous system to settle,
Mhm.
in a way that, maybe eventually we do work on the things, or, we just
Or
keep the dog away from the thing for enough time that they just become a bit more calm and confident. But yeah, I think it's a really often overlooked first step, because people who don't necessarily know, they'll have a behavioral issue. Then they come to me and they're like, okay, how do I work on this thing? And I'm like, the way that you work on this thing is by not doing the thing at all.
yeah.
That's how we start. Um, yeah,
No. No,
yeah,
and what you were saying made me think of something, we know there's all these things like let's talk to dogs if we could only talk to them. And like let's change change kind of the roles. No, cuz dogs might also be saying exactly the same thing. No? They might be saying why can't we talk to them?
yeah,
And but if that's the case, your dog observes you so much. Like, I'm sure if you look at your dog, they're kind of looking at you more than half the time. Like, if they could actually talk, they'd know so much about us. And they're picking up signals, whether it's how we move, our tone. Um, so, all this other stuff, they're learning to adapt.
yes,
And that ability for them to know us so well, to get to know us, because your dog gets to know you. How could you not kind of reciprocate and kind of get over the hurdle of like, I can't talk to my dog? No, you can't talk to your dog. How else can you communicate with this living being that you cohabitate with? And there's so many ways and you actually do it. There's a lot of kind of tacit knowledge of how you interact with your dog that because it's just there, it doesn't kind of bubble up, but you communicate a ton with your dog. Just not the easy way, not the spoken way.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The body language and the energy way.
Totally. There's
Yeah,
a yeah, and they
you're s you're so right, like, they're reading us constantly, like, and we can read them, we have, like, again, in terms of, like, our responsibilities as people who have dogs. Um oh, Jasmine's asking if it's being recorded. It is. You'll get the replay, tomorrow. Um, Thank you for joining. Where was I?
the
Oh yeah,
reciprocal
like we have a
communication.
responsibility to kind of like learn about a dog's body language and behaviors, like and what they're saying. And that's like so part of how we can be in relationship with them, where they feel like seen and understood. Um yeah. Um this has been so great. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I've really loved learning about dog and animal centered design. What a cool concept.
Thank you. No, yeah,
Yeah.
it's something that like the reaction usually is like, "What?" And then you explain it and everybody's like, "Ah, makes so much sense."
Yeah, yeah. So Louisa, where can people find you?
So you can find me on my website, luisaruge.com. That's LuisaRuge. Or on Pomodogo on Substack, which is kind of where I'm blending canine science and mindfulness to get you to learn all these things you need to learn in a way that doesn't take any more of your time.
Mm. Yeah, it's really, really fascinating stuff. You should check it out if you haven't
Thank
already. And if you haven't subscribed to Walk to Heal, I would encourage you to do so because it comes with a free copy of Meltdown Management, which is basically like a guidebook, exercise book that kind of helps you create your own management plan. It's this thing that we're talking about where we learn about our dog's body language, behaviors, the things that they find stressful, and how we can kind of create a management plan that limits their exposure to those things.
Very cool.
Cool. Okay, well, thank you so much. I hope you
Yeah.
have a good rest of your day. And thanks everyone for joining. I really appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.